People point us out and shake their heads in shame. In gossip circles we are talked about. Darling, on you I hold no legal claim, but here we are again, hiding out. The kisses that you give make our wrong seem so right. It's too late to stop, there's no doubt. We said we wouldn't meet tonight, my dear, but here we are again, hiding out.
How did you get the farm?
I was like a soldier settlers farm. You applied for, you had to go and do it, sort of an oral test to see your suitability, and once you're past that, well, you were eligible to apply for grant, apply for land. It was about 180 acres, 190 acres, I'm sorry. Well, the first thing we came over and we had about a fortnight rabbiting, actually getting rid of the rabbits that were on the estate.
To tell you that when the men finished the outer fences, all the wives, or most of us, helped our husband do the fencing in the paddocks.
Yeah, we didn't all work on the one place. It was, in our case, there was three of us, and we done all the boundary fences, the three of us. And the others were similar. I mean, they were in groups and helped one another to do their section.
So then you had to build a house and sheds?
There's the house. We didn't build the houses though. They were put under contract, and and they had to be built and passed before we could occupy them. We were paid for the first 12 months of wage. Yes.
That was for doing fencing.
Well, we were also paid a wage. We had a fencing. We got paid to fence. We were paid for the rabbits, like, getting rid of the rabbits, but we drew a wage for the first 12 months, more or less. Because before I got the farm, and in the meantime, from when I got out of the army until we got the farm, I was working for a builder, and then eventually I went concreting myself with a friend. When we first went there was no road up to where our plot was, and that's why they sort of, and some of the others never came on until sort of February, I think it was, because they had to have the road had to be completed. You couldn't even drive the track up. It was so wet and you couldn't drive a car or anything up there. We had to build a hut on which was a garage eventually, before we'd sort of occupy.
It was freezing. We eventually put a bit of a ceiling above where our bed was. Of a frosty morning, you can imagine what happened. We got all the drips other than that, and a neighbour had an idea once. You'll laugh at this. She got the broom out, but her husband, unfortunately, was in bed. He got all the drips. But we had a slow combustion stove, and so we shifted that across from Coleraine, and Jim put a pipe out, and of course hot water runs through those, and you've got to have water through them. So we had what was a kerosene tin, you heard of the kerosene tins, out sitting on the edge of a tank, and as that emptied we had to fill it, keep filling it, and we had this slow combustion stove set up in the garage. Of an evening you'd see Jim and I crouched with the oven doors open and the firebox opened in this slow combustion stove, and the kids had to be in bed by 5 o'clock. It was just too cold. We had the garage partitioned off with furniture. We had wardrobes right across the middle of the room with a gap for a doorway, and we had curtains like drapes on a pole to make a door. And in the middle of the bedroom we had a small wardrobe where we used to open the doors to dress, and the kids were one side and we were the other.
The girls were only small.
They were only,
Kay
was 4.
was 4 and Cheryl was only a baby, more or less.
Water was a scarcity too. You bathed your children the night before and saved the water to wash their clothes the next day because you had no water.
Like there's only the garage, that's all the water that we could catch, you know, and they put dams down where they were necessary. End of our property went to the river, but like it was no use to us as far as like do water for around the dairy and things like that. Big dam that was out there for the dairy, when they put windmills on that to pump the water up to it. We put on a little 32 volt plant for a while with the motor, like charge the batteries while we were milking, that sort of thing.
We had a big diesel.
Yeah, electricity was all driven by diesel engine, mostly diesel, some put petrol engines on. But there was a lever there that you could turn off and then so that you could swing it over without compression. It was still pretty heavy. But you'd done that until you got up a fair bit of wind, and then you switched the lever, and of course it hit the compression and away she'd go. So
We had what you called a tilly light, which was a terrific light. Got a big base on them with a pump thing. Had a mantle up in the top, a round globe with a mantle. Yes.
that's all we had in the dairy was at that time.
We always loved apples. We had heaps of apples, always did. And we were up the paddock with the 2 girls, and I always put them on a bag in the centre of where we were fencing, and I gave them things to play with and told them not to move from there because there was plenty of grass around and you were frightened of snakes. And so they used to sit there and play while we did the fencing, and we put these apples on a post, meaning to come back and eat them later on. And anyway, we did our fencing, what we had to do for that day, and come back, and here were all the cows in the paddock munching away, all eating our apples. There were none left.
The settlers came to town once a week. That was about the extent of it.
In
Other than there was 1 or 2 playboys used to come up with more crops. I can't leave that out.
in those days we had a butcher calling and a baker calling, and the vegetable people used to come out too.
The girls weren't at school when we went there first.
So where did they go to school?
Dunrobin.
Was that was how many miles from your place?
About 5,
4.5.
4.5 to 5.
So you drive them?
Yeah, we just taken sort of. There was a couple going to school when we went there. From the homestead, there was a girl there, and their next door neighbours, they had 1 going or 2.
They had,
2
I
going,
think it was only 1 because the other one was the same age as Kay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
No, there's really only about 2 that were going to school when we went there. Because eventually there was about 20 going to school out there, I think.
Your population must have made a lot of difference to Casterton.
Yes, they told us that, and they said that it sort of, it was new population into the town, you know, sort of. We found it terribly hard to mix in with them when we first come.
The locals out there,
They
like,
were all
they were
right.
quite
Yeah.
all right, but they were like, you had to be careful what you said because they're all related.
We dairied for 28 years, I think we worked
It
it out
probably
once.
would be, but
Yeah.
and then like we took over the place next door as well, bought it, I think didn't
Yeah.
take it over. But I know it was still rather pretty tight sort of times because there was a drought and just after we reared a heap of calves and we could have sold them for more when they were born than what we kept them for 12 months and had to sell them for less than what they would have got at the gate when they were born. We bought some sheep killers and went to kill one and it was in lamb, so we kept them and that sort of put us on the track. We sort of switched to half sheep then eventually and we went out of dairying and went on to beef cattle and
Yeah.
lambs and I had an offer to drive the school bus from Retreat out there and I'd done that for about 15 years I think. They always said that's the best cow I ever had.
So what of your children? What's their life like, each of them? Are they still around you? Obviously a couple.
We've lost one like a second.
Yeah. One's in Mount Gambier and
And
sort of
Kay
Kay,
was
yeah.
here.
She teaches.
She's part-time teaching.
Yeah.
Cheryl's she was a receptionist in the doctor's clinic at
You
Ferris
mean,
Clinic.
you mean Wendy?
Well, Wendy, sorry, down Mount Gambier.
So that your son's got the farm, but he's doing another work around here as well.
Yes.
Yeah, he works for Elder Smith. He manages the merchandise part at Elder Smith.
So how long have you been in this house?
About 21 years, I think it is.
Okay.
We come in here and when Jim was driving the bus because we thought that it's easier. He only had to go to the farm once a day, you see, and look things over, whereas to come into the bus, he was driving twice a day then, so we had to come twice to town. So we come in and bought this place.
Anyhow, got no regrets, I suppose. When you look back, we're still kicking along and going. Lived a reasonable life.
It's too late to stop, there's no doubt. We said